Welcome back to the Old Colony Cast, a podcast about all things Plymouth and surrounding areas. I am Andy, your host, and I am joined once again by Hanna.
Hello. And
I've been complimenting you a lot, so I'm not going to do it anymore. But the dude that edits all these things, he's got 2 arms. It's a compliment. So, Fish, welcome back.
Hello.
This is where you speak.
Just wave.
Yeah, that's great radio. Thanks, Fish.
I said hello.
So, as always, we talk about all things Plymouth and surrounding areas, and we've been having a lot of fun with that. We've been talking a little Whitey Bulger and turtle statues that talk to you, and, Plymouth Rock, of course. Yep. You can always go back and check out those. But, Hanna, what are we going to talk about today?
We are going to talk about the Italian anarchists Sacco and Vanzetti from the early 1900s.
Okay.
You guys...
And we didn't use a app or anything to tell us how to pronounce any of this stuff.
No, those names, nope. Confident. Confident in that.
So I'm actually pretty intrigued by this because I realized as I'm sitting here doing the intro that I forgot what we were talking about today. And I'm like, what are we talking about? I think that's the most genuine question I've ever asked.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah.
I, too, took these notes a while ago and was just running through them and was like, how am I going to talk about this again? Like, where am I starting? Because I don't know if you guys know this, but I write everything down and then somehow my brain forms a way around like the page the way I want to talk about things, and It's not always in order.
It's not always in a normal sense.
No.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it comes out, and you know what? I'm sure it'll be great. We're perfect, actually.
Hey, and if it's not in a perfect linear form, hey, that's anarchy, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't confine me with your normal stories.
You guys know anything about these two?
No, not a thing.
Okay. So this is a little bit. So my dad suggested we do this because it was recently the anniversary of their trial case. It was like the 100-year anniversary or something like that. Probably off by a couple years, but it was an anniversary nonetheless. So to know about Sacco and Vanzetti, we actually need to talk about the person who inspired them most, Luigi
Galliani.
There we go.
Wow, are you okay? Do you have like a sore throat or?
Yeah.
Do you need like a cough drop?
I just really get like
robotic
guttural when I pronounce Italian last names. So Luigi, I'm not gonna go back and do it again. Luigi Galliani was an anarchist in the United States that in the early 1900s, and he started the Gallianists, which were literally just people who followed his mindset of anarchy. And he was active between 1901 and 1919. And allegedly, so he's an Italian immigrant, so a lot of the people who followed him also happen to be Italian immigrants. And allegedly, Nicola... Well, I shouldn't say allegedly. They were pretty blatantly anarchist. I think there's just certain parts of their... when we get into the case, there's certain parts of their beliefs that are alleged and not necessarily because they're pulled into the case, but maybe not should have been. Anyway, okay. So Nicola Sacco, he was born April 22nd, 1891, and he was from... Oh, I should have pulled up that app for this next one.
He's from Italy.
He's from Italy. Let's round it out to that.
Give it a try. Come on, give it a try.
No, because it's like a whole area of it, and they're both from slightly different areas, but they're from Italy. And Bartolomeo Vanzetti was born June 11th, 1888, and they both immigrated to the United States in 1908, but they didn't actually meet until 1917. They just happened to immigrate the same year. So Sacco was an Italian shoemaker. Well, actually, also a shoemaker. No, he's just a shoemaker in the U.S. Sorry. I keep saying that wrong. Halfway through my coffee, guys. Sorry. He was a shoemaker in Italy and a night watchman for his father's vineyard. So that was his line of work in Italy, and it transferred over here. Not so much the night watchman part, but the shoemaking.
Makes sense.
Yes. And then Vanzetti was a fishmonger, both in Italy and over here too. So, although they were both pretty young when they emigrated, they were late teens, so like 17, 18. But they had great work ethic, I guess. So, like I said, they followed Luigi Galliani, who published the Cronaca Servisiva. The best
kept that app open.
Yeah, gosh. And it advocated for violent revolutions. And just obviously, it's an anarchist literature. So that was actually suppressed by the United States government as a publication that was like speaking out against the United States government. Mm-hmm. And Galliani was deported because of so many things, but one of the reasons was because of that. Along with 8 other of his followers. So I don't know like where they were hanging out necessarily, other Massachusetts based or in this area, but like I'm like, did they all live together? Kind of sounds like they did the further along you get. I'm like, How did they get? They're like, know where everyone was. I don't know. It just seemed crazy to me. They're like 8 of his followers. It sounded like a disbandment of a cult or something.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Almost like a commune or something?
Exactly. I don't think that was the case, but in my mind, that's where I went with it. So the group remained active after Galliani was deported and targeted U.S. politicians, judges, and federal and local officials, and especially those who supported deportation, and targeted them in so many ways. If I could count the amount of like bombings that was mentioned in all of the articles I read about them, I really couldn't count. At like one point, I just literally wrote like they did a lot of bombings. Like there's no other way around it. Attempted, because not all ended in like people getting hurt.
Right.
A lot of mail bombs. They attacked embassies. It was crazy. All
here in Massachusetts?
No, all over the world. So they were active
to
Italy, and then like in Europe and in Massachusetts. Massachusetts, I think they did more like government officials.
Yeah.
So one of the more notable attempted bombings was of the Attorney General Mitchell Palmer by Carlo Valdenosi. Yep. So he was attempting to deliver a bomb, and the bomb actually went off in his hands.
Oh.
And he died.
That'll happen.
Yeah. Like you do.
So that's just a little background of the group. What they followed, really just chaotic eruption and disarming of the government. It's pretty much what they were going for. So now Sacco and Vanzetti aren't necessarily in the story yet, but we're going to talk about the crime that happened that got them involved.
Can we just touch on, so they're anarchists, and they obviously want to take down the government, but is it a matter of there being no rules at all, or just like, my anarchist group is going to set up our rules, and your anarchist group can set up your rules? And
I mean, kind of defeats the purpose if you're having rules anyway for anarchists, but that's fine.
Yeah, no,
that's my question. Is exactly what, because I've met anarchists who've been like, no, it's not, anarchy doesn't mean no rules. It's just there's no, overseeing government or.
Yeah, they pretty much were just against overseeing government. I didn't read Galliani's. I said that wrong already, but I didn't read his publication.
Yeah.
Galliani's. Yeah, I didn't read his publication. for this in preparation, but they seem to just be really against corruption in government specifically. That's where I saw the most, and where they thought there was corruption specifically.
Okay.
So I don't think they were for government at all, but they had some method of targeting, because it wasn't necessarily like just hog wild trying to blow up every single person's house that was involved in government ever. They were targeting a lot of people that had some amount of corruption.
No, all right.
So not completely like just get rid of the government, but definitely not for the government that we have / had, because laws have slightly changed since then. So Braintree, Massachusetts, at the Morrill Shoe Company, right off Pearl Street, there are two employees, Alessandro Berardelli. I'm so sorry.
For our Italian listeners, we're sorry.
Hey, you know what? Sorry. That's literally the Berardelli. There we go. He was a security guard, and Frederick Parmenter, he was a paymaster. So they were delivering the weekly payroll. And this is, obviously, they were targeted for something. The money they held, obviously. So what else? But they were targeted specifically because that someone on the inside, or someone had an inside scoop that was happening that day. So they were both killed, and Alessandro was armed because he was the guard. He was shot 4 times before he could pull out his own gun, and Frederick was shot 2 times. And the person who shot them, or persons, grabbed the boxes and hopped in a dark blue Buick, and then apparently there were other men in the car too, and it sped away, and there were employees on the side of the building where they fired off several shots into the crowd of people, which I don't think there were any other casualties. It was just the 2 targeted people. So they did some early 1900s ballistics, because this is, I believe it's April 15th. Did I not write this date down?
Well, you said early 1917.
Yeah, yes. Okay, thank you. So they did some ballistics, and for the time, I found the ballistics to be like fairly intuitive. I'm not super familiar with like early, I don't know, what is that, the 20th century, early 20th century ballistics or forensics at all, but seemed like they did an okay job. So they found 5 of the 6 bullets were found in the Alessandro Bardelli. He was the security guard. Sorry, not found in him, because the other person was shot twice, but they were fired from the same gun, and then one of the other shots was fired from a different gun, which is kind of where they gathered that 2 people might have been involved.
So basically 5 of the 6 bullets were from one gun, and 1 was from another.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
It was a... Sorry. The bullets, so they found a lot of casings. And they figured that the casings were actually made locally in 3 of the gun manufacturers around the area, Winchester being one of them. So, which comes up later. Winchester and... No, I think it was just Winchester. So anyway, there was also a 32 caliber Savage model that is the guard's gun that was he didn't have it by the time they got to the body. So his gun was missing.
So they took the box and
his gun.
Okay.
Yeah, but this was found out afterwards. So the Buick was found 2 days later with several 12-gauge shotgun shells in it. So which they think was probably what was fired into the crowd of people. So, pretty crazy situation. It was out in the open, too. It wasn't like it was under the veil of night or anything. Like, people were actively there working when it happened. Yeah, I don't know. A fairly reckless endeavor as far as whoever was willing to do it. So
not exactly a Danny Ocean style plan.
No. Definitely they figured someone knew it was going down at that time, and that's where like they were on the hunt from there. They thought whoever did this likely knows someone who works here or works here. So there was another robbery, it was a few weeks earlier. So this one was actually in Bridgewater. It was at another shoe factory, and the police chief suspected that this guy, Horatio, I should have pulled up that app again. You guys good with Italian last names?
Sure, why not?
Let's give it a shot. Coacci. Coach?
I'm going to go with Kochi.
Kochi? That's what I thought.
I have one question, and this might be better directed at Fish.
Go ahead.
Where's there a shoe factory in Bridgewater?
Okay.
Or is this...
It's been torn down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Not like... fairly recently, within the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
God, and this is where I get really embarrassed because I can't remember street names from the town I've lived in for 30-something years. Basically, do you remember that big abandoned building next to the 99?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of off of...
that makes perfect sense because the train station...
Yeah, it's off of Route 18. It's by the train station. It's next to the big shopping plaza where the Roach Brothers is.
Okay.
That used to be a shoe factory.
All right. Just because in my brain, I was thinking... I was mashing... We had a lot of shoe factories, apparently.
Shoemaking was a huge deal in Massachusetts around the turn of the century.
Yeah.
Most of my family worked there at one point.
No kidding.
Yep.
Well,
the whole family made shoes.
See that? We go into the history of the area and the history of Fish.
Just a couple cobblers hanging out. Making... joking. The cobbler's a different thing. So anyway, Bridgewater. Mm-hmm. So nearby, another shoe factory in a few weeks prior. So this one, there were no deaths, but the people who robbed or attempted to rob, because I don't think it was actually, it was not successful. They attempted to rob in the same way, like on payday, catch the paymaster, same deal.
What do they have against shoes?
What was that?
What do they have against shoes?
I don't think it's shoes. I just think
it sounds like they have someone on the inside.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just circumstance of job, career. So this is who they suspected for the Bridgewater crimes. It was Horatio Kochi and his pal Mario Buddha, and they actually lived together. So after the Braintree, borderline massacre happens, right? They go to Kochi's house and talk to him. This part is where it gets weird. So Kochi was supposed to be deported a few days earlier after actually on the day that the Braintree crime had happened, the robbery and murder had happened. So he's at his house just hanging out after having to be not in the country anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. They didn't really care too much about that, apparently.
Okay, so from what I read,
it sounds like
they're
they're
in sick.
Yeah.
Wait, called sick to the deportation?
He called, guys, you can't deport me. My wife's sick.
Yes. I was getting to that.
Yeah, way to go, Fish.
Well, that's my job. I wanted to see what it felt like.
Yeah, it's not fun. I always feel really bad.
I'm sorry,
Don't
Hannah.
worry about it. It's fine.
She already hates me. It's okay.
Yeah, it's... we will... Oh my gosh. So the police chief in Bridgewater goes and talks to Kochi when he's supposed to have been deported. Fish is right. His wife was sick. He called in sick to his deportation. And they still honestly weren't upset. They were like, okay, well, do you mind hanging out another week? Because he's a suspect at this point. So it was in their favor that he was still there. And,
right, you're not going to deport him if you think he's the one who committed the crime.
Yeah, exactly. So he was like, you know what? No, I think I'd rather just go. And he left.
Like,
she's feeling much better now.
How does that work?
I don't.
On what level are you going? I'm going to get deported. No, hold on, my wife's sick. Okay, we need you to stick around. We don't leave town. The heck with that. Now I want to get deported.
Oh,
Yeah.
Early 1900s.
Like, how do you swing that?
You know what? I'm not entirely sure that he was like that they could like suspend him from leaving the country if he wanted to on his own. Like, because nothing was keeping him from going on his own, right? They were,
and obviously they didn't have enough to arrest him.
exactly. So, yeah, he was like, "No, I'm gonna opt in to that deportation. Thank you." So he's gone, and then they end up talking to Mario Buddha, his roommate. So at this point, let me catch up to my notes. They're talking to Buddha, and he said that Buddha tells him that Kochi does own a gun and that it's in the house somewhere. So they search the house and they don't find it, but they do find a, let's see, like an owner's manual? Is that what it would be? Yeah, an owner's manual
sure.
for,
Yeah.
and it was a gun that likely could be paired with some of the shells that they found
Okay.
at the scene of the crime. So they said, like, these shells for these bullets can fit into guns XYZ. So that could be one of the guns that they used.
So suspicious, but not a smoking gun.
Exactly.
That's what I did there.
So they asked him what kind of car he drove. At this point, they're questioning Buddha. And Buddha says he drives a piece of junk. I don't even think he gives them a real description. But they're asking him because there was a second car seen leaving the Braintree, not leaving the Braintree murder,
Crime scene?
but yeah, it was part of it. So the car was ditched, but someone saw another car meet up with the Buick and take off.
Mm-hmm.
So they're thinking Buddha might own that second car. He doesn't give them a real description other than it's a piece of crap and it's in the mechanic shop right now. Getting fixed. So they're like, coincidence? They think not. So they actually go to the mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
And they tell him if someone comes in for this car or whatever, if this guy comes in or there's people with him, like, or they talk about a Buick, just go, like, give us a heads up. So they talk to the mechanic and he's like, all right, cool. And in further investigation, they find out Kochi worked for both shoe companies that were robbed in Braintree in potential robbery in Bridgewater. So again, the evidence is growing. Not for Sacco and Vanzetti, though, at this point. So this is where they come up. They tag along with their boy Buddha they show up to that mechanic's shop.
Okay.
All together. And the mechanic calls the police and like gives them a heads up and says they were like really chummy. Apparently Buddha's best friends with Sacco and Vanzetti. There's another guy there, Riccardo Orsiani.
Well, generally, if you're getting a ride to pick up your car, that's a friend.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Out on a good afternoon, hanging out. We'll just pop by, pick up the car, and then take it from there. So, interestingly enough, Buddha leaves for Italy. Like, pretty much after that, he gets pointed out to the police that he picked up that car. And they do find that the treads from his car likely match some of the treads found leaving the Buick.
Okay.
So reason to believe that very circumstantial reason to believe that is the car that was a second getaway car, I guess you could say. And Sacco and Vanzetti were tracked down and arrested pretty much right after they visited the mechanic shop. And both of them in possession of guns that they denied owning.
Okay.
Like, they're like...
I was just holding it for somebody.
Yeah. They're like, no, that's not ours.
Yeah.
So Sacco had a loaded .32 Colt model automatic pistol, and the cartridges in his possession were made by likely the same company that made the bullets that they found at the scene.
Mm-hmm.
And Vanzetti had a 12-gauge shotgun and shells, and it was from the shotgun shells that were found with the Buick.
Yep.
And okay, and the gun, they also found the gun that was suspected to be the one that the guard owned. That wasn't at the scene.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure. I was like, right? That's how I read it. I thought they had the gun. And then for a second I read my notes wrong and thought they didn't. And I was like, oh, God. Been thinking this wrong the whole time. So they've got a lot of like not great things going for them as far as evidence is concerned.
Yeah, it's one of those, a lot of circumstances right up until you get, and we have the guard's gun.
Yeah.
That's but was it smoking, Hanna? Or was it just a gun?
It was just a gun. So, obviously they denied any connection to the event. Orsini gave an alibi for both crimes. He was at work. Good for him. Sacco was at work for the Bridgewater crime, but had April 15th off. And they charged him with the 2 murders and the robbery. And Vanzetti was self-employed. He sold fish and eel and had no alibis because he was self-employed, so they couldn't look at his books or time cards or anything like that.
Right.
So he was charged with the first Bridgewater attempted robbery and murder, and then also charged with murder and robbery in the Braintree shoe factory.
Mm-hmm.
So following their arrest, the Galleonists near and far allegedly started retaliating, and with pretty well organized attacks. Mario Budas, again allegedly, planned the Wall Street bombing, killing 38 people. And I think that was within the same month or so after they were arrested. And there was a bomb sent in the mail to the U.S. Embassy in Paris. There were no deaths, but there was a lot of that going on. Like I said at the beginning, this is like, I could go on with a list of all the bombings or attempted bombings or whatever that they did.
Yeah.
There's a lot of it going on. So I say allegedly too, because a lot of them were never actually caught. So, right? Like, most of them were not, no one was ever caught for any of these bombings. And
we can just put a blanket allegedly.
Right? Like, I'm like, do I have to keep saying this?
No.
No, it's not like anything that was ever proven. They just think there's a lot to say about the time too in the media and the newspapers about how this group was written that I'm not quite sure if it could all be addressed or accredited to them at every circumstance, because more people than just followers of that anarchist group spoke out against the events to come. So their trials, the first trial was just for Vanzetti because he was the only one that was charged for the Bridgewater crimes.
Mm-hmm.
So this introduces the judge that kind of, I don't want to say like ruined anything for them, because I don't think they were clear-cut characters or anything like that in society.
Yeah.
He is Judge Thayer. So he was known to have spoken out against the anarchist material that was written at the time, which isn't necessarily a good thing for judges to do, because it's supposed to remain like non-biased in certain way, in about a lot of things, we hope. And also publicly denounced immigrants. And
which is always what you want a judge to do.
Yeah. So that's who was trying the first case for Vanzetti. And this one actually ties into our local history a little bit more, although Bridgewater and Braintree is very close. Because he didn't have an alibi for that day, he had to his defense team called upon his customers, and he was selling eels in North Plymouth.
Local tie-in.
Yeah, for people for Easter side, which is like their weekend celebration of Easter from Friday to Sunday.
I didn't know eel was an Easter food.
Oh, yeah. For Italians, it is.
Really?
Yes.
Huh.
Yeah, they make a 7-fish stew.
Well, okay. Thanks, fish.
Vanzetti had the North Plymouth Italians covered for Easter side, and he called 16 witnesses. Well, not he didn't, but his defense team had 16 witnesses from North Plymouth that were all Italian immigrants of some kind. Like, and I don't mean some kind, I mean like some had been here for longer than others. So
right.
There were a few that had translation issues, so they had a translator in the courtroom, but maybe didn't speak the same like regional Italian as the person so it caused some conflict, and they actually gave them a lot of them like a really hard time, the ones that didn't speak English very well, and confused them with dates, pretty much just like tried to negate their like knowledgeability of the whole day, because they would confuse them with like dates and things like that. So they also convinced Vanzetti not to, well, it was just decided among the team that Vanzetti should not go up to like testify for himself, because he would just probably not do well for his own character, given that
he's an anarchist, and
yeah.
It
was just going to feed into the likelihood that he did it. So he was found guilty of both, but one of the charges that he had for the robbery, I believe, or no, attempted murder, they declared a mistrial because apparently the evidence from that was mishandled. Specifically by the jury, and there was some like prejudice with the jury and the evidence that they didn't catch in the trial. So
the jury was prejudiced, and this is coming from a judge that doesn't like immigrants?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's,
it was weird.
Yeah.
So they were like, that was a mistrial. Don't worry about that. But he was still found guilty for the other thing. So the second trial took place on May 21st, 1921, and this is for the Braintree robbery. So this is like the end-all be-all trial for them, because it was likely going to be a trial for their lives, right? And it did indeed become that, but this trial took a pretty long time and was so lengthy to read through. I think this could be one of those like 2-parter episodes if I made it, but honestly, it was, the details of the trial weren't necessarily like the most compelling things. So we're not going to go through it all. We're going to nicely round it out for you guys. So Sacco hired Fred H. Moore and William Callahan for his defense team. And they actually said that Moore was a really radical lawyer and probably hurt his case more than anything because he was so disruptive in court. Like, he would take off his shoes. He'd do weird stuff. Yeah, really, he was weird. It sounded like he was like a weird lawyer hippie kind of guy. Yeah. Just like getting too comfortable and like speaking out of turn. I don't know. So, and then Vanzetti was represented by Jeremiah Thomas and Jeremiah and Thomas McCartney. Or McCarney. And nothing crazy about them. I think the defense and gosh, what do we call the people who are on the state side?
Prosecution.
Prosecution. I got a lot of words in front of me. All right.
No judgment.
The defense and the prosecution obviously spent the entire time trying to discredit one over the other. That's what they do in court. But one thing was ever present, and it was their anarchist beliefs, and they're trying to paint their character in that.
Mm-hmm.
And that really just wasn't the case, right? Like, that's not what they were being tried for. They were being tried for robbery and murder. So it really felt like they were on trial for being anarchists, I guess, was the overall feeling of the trial.
So the trial had a feeling of an argument on Facebook where it starts off about one thing, and next thing you know, they're comparing you to Hitler because you like pineapple on your pizza. Yeah,
pretty much.
Yeah.
And they did end up coming up with alibis backed by several witnesses. And again, same thing, like the prosecution deemed it all like circumstantial, and that it wasn't actually like, it was just disqualifying everything they brought to the table, essentially, as far as the jury was concerned. So on July 21st, the jury deliberated for 3 hours, took a dinner break, and then came back with guilty verdicts. So the hysteria that erupted over that was for two big reasons. Like I said, the supporters insisted they were tried for their views and not their actual crimes. And the jury just insisted that it had nothing to do with them being anarchists and only to do with their crimes. And the second big reason was that they were immigrants. So
it all kind of ties back to today.
Yeah, this was like, felt so relevant, and a lot of it, I was like reading this stuff and I was like, but can I really trust that that's what happened? Because maybe the media was just painting them in a light of anarchists and whatever, especially when it comes to the protests that broke out for them. Right? So people were outraged about this, and they weren't necessarily all the Galani's anarchists like group. It was a public matter. So there were protests like in cities around the world, and it wasn't just because they felt that the US judicial system didn't properly try these two people.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty blatantly obvious, I guess, from all accounts. So there was a very strong chance that they would be sentenced to death. I think I mentioned it already. It's kind of where it was headed, right? And there were just demonstrations and pleas from people. So not just anyone, like the public was writing in, certainly, but there were actual like notable writers, intellectuals that were writing in and asking like the governor to, what is it called when you pardon people? They weren't on death row, but they were asking for the trial to just
commute the sentence.
Yeah, commute the sentence. Mm-hmm. And I mean, he was asked at one point to pardon it, but we're not quite there yet. So Anatole France, the Nobel Prize winner for literature in 1921, wrote a plea to the American people. And he wrote it pretty much all the same stuff I was just telling you, just in much clearer thoughts and eloquentness that the public could understand. And the defense tried to stir up awareness on their end too, while they were sitting in jail awaiting what could possibly be their death sentence. But it created like that divide in the public, right? There were some people that were like, they're anarchists, like they deserved it. They deserve what's coming for them. And then it created like an even stronger, bigger movement of, well, they're not just weren't tried fairly. So they tried to appeal their guilty sentence at the Supreme Court, and they ruled like no go. They were like, yeah, no, you're still guilty. The Massachusetts Supreme Court. And in 1925, oh, sorry, I skipped ahead. Pretend I didn't say that. So in January 1927, they appealed to the Supreme Court again, and it was denied again. And then that's when they tried to get clemency from the governor. And after 2 weeks of his legal team, like, going through the evidence and the trial, like, papers, they deemed that it was actually a fair trial, and those guys were good to be sentenced by Judge Thayer again.
Same judge?
Same judge.
Okay.
Because we just had the jury deliberate that they were guilty of this crime, and now the judge is going to sentence them to whatever punishment their crimes are worthy of, and he sentenced them to death. So, the date had been pushed back a little bit, but this is, so April 9th, 1927, right? So now we're years after the actual crime has happened. It's like 6 years. And normally I see death, like, right when you see a death sentence, you're like, oh, they're going to try to appeal that over and over and over again.
Right.
Even more. They stopped at the Massachusetts Supreme Court and the governor, apparently. But I think there's a certain amount, like, of, I don't know the logistics of it, but I don't know if they had the ability to go up higher than that. Yeah. So that was it. Once they were sentenced to death, it was just a couple months later, in August 22nd or 23rd. So it was going to be at midnight on August 22nd that they were scheduled to die by electric chair. Okay. So 20,000 protesters showed up to Boston Commons for it because it was going to be happening there.
They were going to electrocute them
on the Common?
On the Common?
Not on the Commons. It was just happening. Sorry.
Okay.
Like, oh God.
I'm like, holy.
That's morbid. Andy.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. That was a legitimate. Sorry, my bad.
That's okay. No, I honestly, when I read it, that's how I read it at first, and I was like, "Shut up." That's okay. So this, I've mentioned before that there was like so many bombings, I really couldn't get to to like the specifics. That's all still happening. So there's like anarchy going on, not just in our country, in Italy. There's, like I said, there's several countries like participating in the injustice of it. And that's still happening up until they die and after they die. Mm-hmm. So Sacco, now we're at the moment where they're up to bat, so to speak, right? So Sacco's last, that's terrible, but Sacco's last words, he just said, "Farewell, mother." And Vanzetti said, "I wish to forgive some people for what they are doing to me now." Which, I don't know, pretty passive aggressive, I guess.
Yeah. You guys can figure out who I forgive. And
yeah.
Like, some of you guys are okay. You know who you are.
Yeah. And I just should go back to this point, too. So Vanzetti and Sacco, when they were in prison, Vanzetti more than Sacco, it sounded like, so publicly denounced the people involved in their trial. Obviously, they were not fans of Thayer. Vanzetti came out and said that Thayer was, like, you know, a biased, like, contributor in his trial, and that he was asking all of his anarchist comrades to seek revenge on him, like, specifically him. They're like, he sucked, go get him. So he was a very outspoken person. I mean, who wouldn't be in that situation? But he was very outspoken the whole time. So for his last words to be that, I was a little surprised by. Like, a little light-handed for him.
Yeah, like, you expect him to be like, I don't forgive these people.
Yeah.
Listen.
And if you wanted to kill them, good. Like, it was very interesting. So, like I said, violent demonstrations swept the city. They were in an open casket for 2 days of mourning out of a Boston church in the North End. After that, 10,000 mourners came and carried them to Hill Cemetery. And there was like the police and them along the way got into it. Like it was a morning, and it was a protest at the same time, and it was police and the crowd clashing. Like, it was a really big event. There's 10,000 people like carrying caskets down the road, and also like saying F the police. Like, you know what I mean? It was like, sounds like a crazy day in Boston, to say the least. And they were cremated, and their ashes were sent to Italy. Vanzetti, I believe, was buried with his mother's remains, and Sacco's was sent to the town he was born in. And that trial today is still looked at and studied. Like, in law schools, it's still studied as a way of, like, just the two big issues that were going on with it, and, like, what is not to do and what to do. And it's still a very talked about scenario or thing that happened in the U.S. like judicial system. And that's
I mean, to get the death sentence for murder, having a gun that doesn't belong to you seems like very flimsy evidence. Like, well, you were definitely up to no good, but were you the guy that pulled the trigger?
Oh, I forgot to mention this. It was when I said, I said 1927.
Yep.
So, rewind. So in 1927, before they're sentenced to death, oh my gosh, sorry, 1925, before they're sentenced to death, this guy, Celestino Medeiros, confessed to the Braintree crimes. And they tried to get it turned over again, and they reviewed Medeiros' like history, that decided that his character wasn't trustworthy and decided he was lying about it. He was not in their group. He was not an anarchist. He didn't really know these guys. He had no reason to lie about it.
Yeah.
Other than someone like paid him or whatever. But yeah, he confessed, and they were still denied a retrial from him. From Thayer or whatever. So, just another thing that looks really weird.
Yeah,
as far
there's
as
a lot of sketchy stuff going on.
Yeah.
Not saying that they're innocent, but they might not be guilty of what they got.
Yes, exactly. They're guilty of being...
And they might have been...
different mindset. That's okay, Fish. They're guilty of being anarchists, is what pretty much everyone... Not everyone, but what the trial came down to.
Did they really spend a lot of time about what their like ideology was specifically, or was it just kind of like, they're anarchists and we know that's bad? Yeah,
they pretty much did whatever they could to paint their character as immoral and like not right with the law. So obviously they would break these laws too. Right. So it's like, oh, they don't agree with our laws, so what's keeping them from breaking our laws? Sort of thing, which is not entirely not the case. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know any anarchists personally, but yeah, I know I don't know anyone who's killed anyone. So it's just crazy. Like, I definitely heard the names. I didn't realize it was a local thing at all. Yeah, very local. Yeah. Very local. But interesting case, very interesting. And like I said, they still use it today to like pick apart and study all the time in those fancy law schools. See, I feel like that's where I probably heard it from, is like, you know,
court in fancy law school.
Well, no, yeah, like court movies and stuff. You know, it's one of those they'll.
Oh yeah.
Whether it's a correct quote or not, they'll cite like, oh, you know, it's Sacco and Vanzetti and blah blah, and try to get some sort of, you know, objection overruled or something, just for like a movie trope. It sounds like official. Right. It definitely does. It's like that name sticks out, I think, even if you don't
exactly know what the case entailed. And it was definitely fun to read through these notes again after not reading them for a week or so. Thanks, guys. Oh, man. Yeah, it was interesting. I knew the big picture about it, but I didn't know any of the specifics and how much of the evidence was very circumstantial. So,
do we know? I don't remember if you said. Do we know how much money they allegedly stole?
actually, I didn't see that anywhere. I hope it was worth it.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't because they're dead.
You never know.
Yeah.
Maybe worth it to someone who got it.
Oh, that's true. I suppose if you
Right?
got away with a crime and it wasn't really them, then it was worth every penny. Do we know what happened to Galliano?
He died in Italy at some point. Yeah.
No follow up on him.
Yeah, no. He went after he went to Italy, he still did his thing over there. But he was a little bit older when he left the US.
Yeah.
And went over in Italy, yeah. So yeah, I think he literally just eventually passed away. Just like us all will eventually pass away.
On that happy note. Well, that's all. I'm glad your dad suggested this one because, like I said, I didn't know anything about it, so
Yeah,
it was a good one.
it definitely was.
So I think that wraps it up for us. Thank you for listening. You can find us on all the socials at Old Colony Cast, and send us in any ideas that you may have for topics. We're always looking to add to the list. I don't know what we're going to do next, but we have a long list, and we have some other things that we're working on, some guests that will be cool for the future, and some cool ideas. Like I thought of one during the show that I'm going to have to add to the list. But so thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys back. See you guys. You'll hear us back here in 2 weeks. I don't know. We still don't have a sign off.
It's just when we stop talking.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to the podcast. You can find us on all social medias at Inebri-art, except for Instagram. We're at Inebri-art6. You can email us with your questions, complaints, and whatnot at Inebri-art@yahoo.com. And if you're looking for more podcasts, you can check out the other podcasts on our network, Retro Redoctopus, America's Hometown Horror, and, of course, Bar Talk, Old Colony, and Inebri-art Podcast, the original. So check those out and subscribe and comment so we can reach more people. And thanks for listening.